Roll call. I am here, Julie Seastrom,
Here.
Jemiah Wassam,
Here.
Alyssa Lane Keene, Valerie Switzler,
Here.
Diane Tiemann, Michael Cherry, Angela Fasana, Jennifer Jackson,
Half that. How about Jesse Jackson instead of Jennifer Reed, Cow Creek?
Okay, you're a little further down. Thank you, Jesse. Melissa Montero, Becky Cantrell, Marcia Frost, Jory Spencer, Jamie Crane,
Be quiet to everybody else. Your mic is kind of going in and out.
oh, is it?
Mhm.
Oh. Let me try to. Jesse Jackson,
Here, yeah, and your audio is going in and out. It was out when you said my name right there.
oh, sorry, is that any better? I tried to change my internet.
Much better, much better.
Okay. Great, thank you. Jennifer, so Jennifer Reed's absent today,
Yep.
okay, and Malia Skunkcap,
Here.
record, we do not have quorum. If one more tribe joins, we will have quorum. The next thing we had on the agenda was tribal program sharing. We found this really valuable, especially when we're looking at ways that to spend money that's come down. All the tribes have really been able to service their community with these dollars and think outside the box. And so we today Warm Springs is going to share with us.
Are you ready, Val? Yes, I am. Thank you.
Where are we? Can you all see that?
No.
Yeah.
We see your name.
What? Sorry, 1 minute. Can you see that?
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this to. Sorry, y'all. Are you seeing everything or just the slides?
Everything.
Well, of course. There we go. How's that?
Yep.
Beautiful.
Alrighty. Okay, Val, take it away. Just let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Okay, that one is actually the end slide.
Oh, well, then we'll go to the beginning. Maybe that'll be better. There we go.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say thank you guys for allowing me to share a little bit what's going on in our Language for Littles program. We currently go to the early childhood education program to have the language taught to our preschool children. And what we have been wanting to teach them has been a lot of hands-on materials that they can do, like focus on some crafts. We get the students' hands moving and focus on coloring and beading and as well as storytelling. Once a week, they learn cultural songs and dances of the tribes. And throughout the year, we've done not only the traditional songs, but we even during Christmas, we had them doing Christmas carols that were once translated. I think I might have been in the fourth grade when some of the songs were translated from English to the language, and the teachers had taught those as well. And if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, some of the things that we do to get them moving along, as you can see, we've got littles on the Warm Springs Elder Bus, and the elders were pretty excited to be out there with their grandchildren, and you know, and they would go out just like I would go out, like with my cowboy hat and my cowboy boots, and it was wonderful to see them not only interact with the teachers but with their parents. And you can go to the next slide. So, one of the things that we do is we take our kids out root digging every year. And so what you see here is some of the children with their parents out in the root digging fields. And one mom here is showing, how to use the cupping with their little, and then other one, and it doesn't matter whether they're boys or girls, we teach them both about being in the root field and how we sustainably harvest our foods. And this is just right off the highway, so the students can start to recognize that there's foods all around them, and that they'll be able to dig those same kind of roots when they're on their own, or when they're with their parents. And so when the parents go out, it's a really good bonding experience for them, to not only to be with their child, but to be with their child doing something with some cultural relevance. And I'll go ahead and let Allison share a little bit about what the program did when they were out there.
We went out there and we as the teachers taught them in the language out, or each one of us, it was Sapt and the other one was, or Ichishkin and the other one was in Kiksh. So we were teaching not only just the child, but we were teaching the parent also the words. And then the parents were teaching the child, okay, you take your tops off, you put them back in the ground. This is how that keeps coming back up. So it was making that circle a full complete.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you could go to the next slide. And so, we shared, or some of the teachers and some of the parents shared with their little ones, the little, they're not afraid to get dirty. And so it was just wonderful to be out there with them. And you could see the little guys getting their lunch in the shade of the bus. And so we were very happy with the outcome of the field trip. Not only did it teach them or taught the parents, what to look out for, what roots to dig, where you dig them at, and it also taught the child. And so we're hoping to revitalize those traditions and the gathering of food in our community. And we hope that we'll be able to keep this going throughout our programming. So if we can go to the next slide. As you know, parenting education doesn't always happen in the classroom. And so we have one of the teachers here explaining about the roots and sharing with a parent and then the children the where to get the roots, what the tops look like, what it is that they are, how to dig them, and how to process or take care of them and take care of the land that it came from. And if we could go to the next slide. And parenting education, sometimes it does happen in the classroom, but this is the Longhouse. Some of it is the Longhouse, and one of them is actually in the education building. And as you could see that they're getting ready for not only the powwow, which I couldn't upload the pictures on. Oh man, you guys' hearts would have just melted. But the parents are making their children's regalia not only for the graduation, but for their dancing during the Elder Honor Seniors Day. Did you want to say a little more about that? And so we've got 3 parents here that I showcased. One, because this is a traditional dress in it's called a shell dress in the yellow, which will be used for ceremony. The other 2 are wing dresses that was made for their child. And so they do get hands-on training when they're with us, and we also provide the language for them when they come to the education classes. And we try to hold the classes at least twice a week, but there are times when we didn't get to meet some of those deadlines, but we were able to share as much as we could. And another thing that didn't come up was the dress for boys. And one parent had made their child a complete outfit, and it was a powwow outfit, and it was the vest, the chaps, the moccasins, the bone breastplate, and then they brought their own feathers, their own bustle. And so, you know, they looked really sharp during the Elders Honor Seniors Day. And we could go to the next slide, please.
They're also trying to get ready for first meal. The littles are going to present their first foods. So we're going to have it, I believe it's going to be next month we're going to do it. Or no, sometime this month. They're going to do it, and they're going to serve the food all the way around. So they're going to serve their first foods that they've dug.
It's wonderful to learn these things when they're still little, and then it's just ingrained into them what food goes first, who goes first or who goes next in line, and what the boys' roles are, what the girls' roles are. And so with the first foods presentation, the children will serve their parents and the teachers. And so it's going to be wonderful. We're hoping that we'll be able to bring all 3 roots to the table, as they gathered most of the roots themselves. And for kindergarten transition, we have 56 graduates. Each one of them had language in some way or fashion. We had 36 boys and 20 girls. So a lot of boys this year. So they'll all be fighting over the girls. And in total, we served 90 students this year and 48 parents. And so it's been just a really jam-packed year. Allison, who's my kicks teacher here, has been so busy trying to not only learn the language, but to present it and to share in that kindergarten transition, as that's the program that she was hired under. Mhm. So, if you have any questions, let me know. But that's a little bit about what's going on in Warm Springs and, the things that we share. We wouldn't be able to do it without the parents. And the parents have been great supporters of the language. We recently had a education update meeting, and most of we asked them to rank which programs they would like to see come through the education program. And language, of course, topped the list as usual. So it's really, language is really impactful. We, to go beyond where this is at, this starts them out and it gives them a good foundation. And what we're hoping for is that, uh, within a few years, we'll have 100% graduation rate. We're at 90 something right now, but I would love to be able to. I know graduation rates aren't the only means of, success of students, but these students will have the ability to learn the language or all three languages if they wanted. And we're graduating our first 7 students with the biliteracy seal this year. So, it's just a firm foundation of where we're starting our kids and where we want to go with them. So, there's any questions, please let me know.
Chair, is it okay to say something?
Of course.
I just want to say thank you, Valerie and Allison, for sharing your update of your program with us today. It's incredible, especially to see the links that you're making between the grandparents and the parents and the children by having everybody come together through the educational process. Everybody's included. It's not like the kids are dropped off and somebody else does everything and then the kids are picked up. It's just beautiful. And that you're keeping your language as primary, just inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Val, do parents stay or come into the classroom during language times, and elders, are they a part of the language that's in the preschool and for the kids?
Most of my team are elders now. But, as far as the parents, no, we haven't been able, most of them are working parents. And so it's not high on their priority list to be there for their children during the day. But, they will be there when it's time to do workshops or, the wing dress classes, the programs that Allison helps puts on. And the elders, we do have 3 elders two elders that are working for us, helping us build their regalia. And so they'll come, the parents come at that time when it's after 5 o'clock.
Just to back up on the whole parent thing, I have had 5 parents in total coming to my classes. So they are coming in. At first, I'd only have 1. I didn't have any, and then I started having 1. Now I'm up to 5. They actually come into the classroom, will sit, and they're so amazed. You know, they come home, and when I send homework home, okay, you guys are gonna teach mom and dad or whoever, and you have to tell them what the word is, say it in the language, and they can't sign that paper until they say the word. So, okay, so then the parent or the grandparent, whoever, will come in and say, what is this word? What did you send home with them? So I explained it to them what it was, and they said, do you mind if I sit and listen for a little bit? I said, yeah, go ahead. And they're so amazed on how advanced their kids are in the language.
That's incredible. And the first foods and having them serve their foods that they gathered is just wonderful. I think it's so much more impactful for them to really understand, gathering and preparing and serving. It's just, that's wonderful. And starting them so little.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I know there's lots of appreciation. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for allowing us to share.
Next, we have Dell updates, and is that you, Alyssa, or Kathy?
Yeah, I can pull up some slides real quick.
Okay.
And yeah, Kathy will give a quick legislative update. I have too many tabs.
While Alyssa pulls that up, it's really hard to follow that presentation by Valerie. So thanks so much for sharing your wonderful, amazing program. And I really liked what you said to Valerie, that it's also the children teaching the parents. And so anyways, on top of many wonderful things, I thought that was a really great highlight from all the work that you're doing. So just a few updates. Legislative session has been quite busy. We are into mid-May already, which is hard to believe. But today was a significant day because the state's revenue forecast was released as of 8 a.m. this morning. And at this point, we're still unpacking the forecast, really trying to analyze what does this mean for state agencies, what does it mean for our agency request budget, as well as things that are in the governor's recommended budget. So right now, we're just doing a little bit of a waiting, trying to hear back next steps, particularly from the Chief Financial Office and also from the Legislative Fiscal Office, in addition to the governor's office. And we have been hearing that our DELC's budget bill, that Senate Bill 5514, could be up for a work session as early as next week. So I believe we have a meeting with DELC and the Legislative Fiscal Office this Friday. So we'll definitely get more details from them in terms of what to expect for the work session. And a work session is basically, it's just a vote. So it's a vote from the education subcommittee members on whether or not they will be voting aye, or which is yes or no, for the budget to then be referred to the full Ways and Means Committee. And then there are lots and lots of policy bills. I think when we last counted, there were over 500 different bills that have been assigned to Ways and Means with a cost for implementation. So now that the revenue forecast has been released, we'll also start hearing more updates and more movement on, of course, not all of those bills, but on how some of those bills will be moving forward. So, I think at this point, we just expect a lot of lobbying to continue happening on various bills, various priorities. And so, the budget will be limited, right, in terms of new spending that the legislature will be allocating to new programs and new efforts. But we are keeping a close eye on things that will be moving that are, of course, of interest to DELC, of interest to House Bill 2815, which is our Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund Bill. And so we will stay in touch closely with the co-chairs of the Full Ways and Means Committee and make sure to regularly update TAC, as well as others who have been really, really involved in the creation of this bill. So at this point, the bill currently is still in the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. In order for it to move forward, it does need to get referred to the subcommittee, which is just that smaller committee of Ways and Means members that will look a little bit more closely on the fiscal impact of the bill. Again, we're not sure yet when that planned date is for the bill to move forward, but we're hoping that it will be towards the end of May, early June. And I know that a couple of weeks ago, we've also talked about a press release upon the passage of the bill. So more updates to come. We know that there's a lot of different coverage right now about the revenue forecast. And so we will make sure that folks are updated with information as we hear back again from the Chief Financial Office, Legislative Fiscal Office, and further direction from the Governor's Office as well. So lots of offices that are at this point trying to make sense of the latest revenue forecast. And with that said, happy to take questions. Director Chatterjee, of course, can also jump in if I missed anything.
Oh, that was perfect. Yeah, we, as Kathy said, we're still understanding what the revenue forecast means and waiting for kind of requests of additional analysis, which will start to give us a better sense. But if there are any questions about kind of current state, happy to try to answer them.
Chair, is it okay to ask a question?
Yes.
I just want to double check to make sure I understood you correctly, Kathy. It's kind of a wait and see time for us until we get the final word.
Yeah, that's right, Julie. And we're really waiting and seeing right now because depending on you know, how much money, right, extra money will be available to spend on new programs. That's sort of like the direction that we're waiting on for the governor. And we know that House Bill 2815 is included in the governor's recommended budget. So that's great. You know, that's you know, been a priority of her office. And so I think at this point, we're just waiting and seeing, you know, other items that are in the GRB and how will they all of the things get funded. So that's what we're waiting further direction on.
A follow-up question for you, Kathy. Does it work in our favor that this 2815 is kind of just a revamp of something that's already been created a couple years ago, and what we're doing is we're just fine-tuning it and reconfiguring it as opposed to creating something new?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And yes, I think that, you know, I think it's great that it's a program that's already in existence, right? And that we're just making some tweaks to it. We're formalizing things, putting things in statute. And then, you know, the bill is also creating you know, in statute an actual fund, right? And so I think all of those things are great reminders for legislators, you know, when they ask us more specific questions about this bill to say, like, we already have a plan in place. We're not, you know, these aren't things that we're starting from scratch. In fact, you know, we have lots of different, you know, things that tribes are already doing, right, to really promote early learning in their communities. And so so those are all really great points. And I think at this point, you know, the legislature is probably going to reach back out to us to ask those like very specific questions. So we will be ready with some talking points and with additional data as well, if they ask for more specifics.
I said that was my last question, but I'm going to ask you one more if it's okay with everybody. Sonia, is it okay to ask one more?
Of course.
One of the things that I've noticed is the testimony that Angela Fasana gave, and then today what Valerie shared with Switzer shared with us as far as their on the boots on the ground work that they're doing with their littles and the programs that they've been doing and that kind of stuff. Will either one of them or both of them be allowed to share those kind of commentaries if there's like yet more time for us to share commentaries and that kind of stuff, or is it's done already and there's no more of that kind of sharing to be going on?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think at this point, when the bill is scheduled for a work session, typically they don't have time again for public testimony or public feedback. It's just, here's the bill, here's what it'll do, and then the committee will just vote on it. But if there are, additional highlights or, program specifics from various tribes that we want to highlight, that we want to let legislators know about, of like, hey, these are things that are already happening in communities, and we want to continue to fund these amazing programs that are happening. I think that is more than welcome, and we can chat a little bit more about what that could look like. But to answer your question directly, the work session wouldn't be another time for public comment or public testimony. I believe that, or at least for verbal public testimony, I believe that there is an opportunity to still submit something in writing. We can confirm and double check with the committee staff on that, Julie, but I think that's a great flag, because the more that we can share our stories, right, and say these are some real life examples of what we're able to do, I think the more powerful and impactful it will be. So we can follow up, but I think that would be a great way to continue advocating for these funds.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Julie, to your earlier question too, this bill can still move even if the funding doesn't, right? And so that's something we'll also reinforce to the legislature, is don't let the funding component derail the bill itself, because we still want to see the replacement of the Tribal Early Learning Hub with the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. And we would like to see dollars added to that fund, but we don't want the bill to be held up just because of the fiscal components. That's something else that we'll be making sure we reinforce with the legislature, to your point, Julie, of there's really two requests here. There's the policy change, and then there's the fiscal request.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So on that, Alyssa, because the first year that the American and Alaskan Native was reauthorized, it was reauthorized with no funds until the next biennium. So if that does pass, would the set aside dollars that we currently get, the 69,000, would those still be available to tribes? It just wouldn't be the increase of the potential 500,000. Is that right?
Correct. Yep,
Okay.
That's right. Yep. So we wouldn't be at zero. There just wouldn't be an increase.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I think the only thing else that I'd like to, when Kathy mentioned that you may be called upon to give further detail or have information ready, I think really showcasing language and culture, because that's what really makes and sets these funds aside from other funds that go to public entities, is just so important, what these funds allow tribes to do in their communities.
Yeah, and we've been able to highlight from the information you all have shared with us through your grant reports. We've been able to summarize for the legislature the types of things you all have been funding, to help highlight that, and to also help show how this is differentiated from like the birth through 5 literacy dollars that had a tribal set aside, for example, and how they're working together, but the real breadth and opportunity that these tribal early learning fund dollars have been able to offer, and give them a sense of how that could kind of scale with additional investment. So it's been really great to draw upon that and help educate and kind of dispel some of the assumptions that are being made, and underscoring the different uses of each of these funds.
Have there been any other, like the other RACs or anyone or any legislator that have had any opposition to our bill or the set aside tribal funds?
No, it's really been well received. I think it is just going to come down to availability of funding. which is why, with the current revenue forecast, we want to really reinforce, even if there isn't enough funding for the full request or to expand the fund at all, you still need to move the bill forward.
Yeah, I think today they said they were anticipating like a 300 million shortfall is if projections stay the way they are.
Yeah, it's a bit of a range. And one of the things that we're waiting on is understanding, for DELC, what is the general fund impact versus the early learning account impact within the Student Success Act. Those are two big components of our budget. The governor's recommended budget is requesting 4.75 million general fund for the tribal early learning plan and fund. But there, you could make a case that it's an allowable use under early learning account if the legislature had resources there. So those are some of the analyses we need to do and scenario planning that we're anticipating receiving from the executive branch and the chief financial office, as well as the legislative branch and the legislative fiscal office.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Should I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Sonia, I think I read the same article you read this morning, and in the Oregonian. I'm not sure, but the first thing I did was I texted our lobbyist and I said, is this something we need to be concerned about? And he said, I'm working on it right now. I'm here doing it. So he, it's like, it's right in progress, And so, like he said, the Oregonian was kind of jumping the gun on their article. I don't know.
Yeah, it takes a bit. I mean, a lot of budget offices have just kind of been head down, really understanding and looking more deeply at what it means for each individual agency's budget. So the next couple days is when we'll start to see requests coming to agencies of what, this is a priority, but is there any way you could reduce the fiscal on this? Or, take a look at your reduction exercises. Is there anything you'd change? Or, are you sure this would need a fiscal? Would it actually cost money to stand up this work group, right? So those are the types of questions we'll start to get once the legislative fiscal office and chief financial office get some time with the revenue forecast and really unpack what it means, as well as whatever delta is there between the revenue forecast that the governor's budget was built on in November versus the May revenue forecast now.
One more question, Sonia, if it's okay.
Yes.
For yourself, Alyssa, and Valerie, I don't know, and who else, but we have the state has those little lottery machines on like every store counter throughout the state, and they get massive money out of them and that kind of stuff. And it's supposedly a portion of that's supposed to come to education, but I don't know like the amounts and that kind of thing. So my question is does anybody who's on today have any idea how much of that actually does come to education, or is that just like some unknown number?
I don't know, Julie, off the top of my head, what portion. It also, so a quick Google search would say 53% of Oregon lottery profits are allocated for public schools from kindergarten through college. What that means in terms of dollar amounts is really going to depend on the revenue forecast itself. And it's that kindergarten through college, right? So it's not going to early learning. It's not going to preschool and childcare programs.
Oh, okay.
There are lottery bonds, which are different than lottery funds that pay for the childcare infrastructure fund at Business Oregon. So that's sort of the only lottery component that we've seen dedicated to early learning, but it's a slightly different pot of funds than lottery funds themselves.
Somebody told me that bonds are not necessarily the surest or the safest kind of system. Is that right or wrong, or my misconception, or you don't know?
It is different. It works differently, and there are different there's different liability and allowable uses when dealing with bond dollars. You also have to wait to sell the bonds versus the lottery funds, which are actual in-hand revenue. So there can be, you know, some risk there. There's also a little bit more flexibility with lottery funds than there are with bonds. So that's something that I know advocates have brought up when we think about future funding and trying to have the most flexible type of revenue available for resourcing early learning.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question.
Are there any other questions on the legislative update part?
Hi, I'm here now, and I actually have a question. This is Dana. I'm wondering how would the continuing service level funding for the tribal hub that would ideally transition into tribal early learning fund dollars be treated versus a new ask for funds? Because there's about the 4.5 million or 4.7 altogether, that's the new ask for funds, but then the continuing service level that's already in Delk's budget would have been like 665,000-ish. So how are those two treated, especially given the state of the revenue forecast?
So anything in our existing budget and current service level budget is treated on its own. So Senate Bill 5514 reflects Delk's budget, existing budget. It can include additional budget requests. The Tribal Early Learning Fund request was not a policy option package. It was an additional request by the governor. So it'll be considered in conjunction with House Bill 2815. It won't be considered as part of our budget bill. But the Tribal Early Learning Hub dollars are already a part of our base budget. So the only adjustment we could see being made is if the legislature chooses to reduce the inflationary adjustment or something like that. But otherwise, generally speaking, they would move forward our budget in full. They don't typically go through and kind of line item reduce particular components of that. So if we do see reductions, it is very unlikely that it would be to something like this. And we are typically consulted. We would not recommend any reductions to this pot of funds, particularly given how small they already are.
Thank you for clarifying on that. And thanks everyone for keeping things going while I wasn't here earlier.
So Alyssa, did you have a separate Delk update from the legislative part, or was that kind of all together?
That's it. Yep, that's it on legislation. So I think we're on to tribal discussion.
Okay. Seems like we did a lot of that
Yeah.
already with this. Were there any, we never did have another tribe join, so it would be an informal discussion. Because we're at 5 of the 6 tribes are tribes have any questions or discussion points? I think right now everything is still so up in the air, especially with the revenue forecast today, which I think has taken everyone by a little surprise. So, Melissa, that was a really good point on that, the early learning plan, you know, it can still move forward because even if it's not funded in this biennium, monetarily, we can still work on the structure of the plan. I mean, we would still have a lot of work to do. We just wouldn't have the funds to fully implement, but we would still be able to get the framework and to get it passed through tribes and established, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So, and they know, legislators know that those are like it, that we would still want it looked at regardless.
Yes, and I think we can reinforce that given this new revenue forecast, we don't want to not work the bill because there's a fiscal. And so that's something we'll reinforce to the legislative fiscal office as well is it can still, the policy itself can still be considered for adoption, even if it goes forward without additional funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like 122, right, for the biennium, because we get like 60, or how much is it that is the direct set aside right now in the base budget?
I think it's like 669,000. Does that sound right, Dana?
And then that would be
Yeah,
divided by
number
9.
that's in my brain is 665,000. So it's about 73,000 per tribe for 2 years.
Okay. Okay. Going.
So it's about $4,000 more than the current biennium for the tribal hub dollars. So hopefully we at least have that, if nothing else besides the bill passing. Obviously more is better. I think we can still do a lot of planning no matter what. There's still a lot of groundwork that we'll need to cover. So like building up the new Otella structure and what that committee, how it functions, making bylaws, like what the meeting schedule is, and writing a tribal early learning plan.
What funds, where do the funds come from that the infrastructure that the Oregon Chamber is administering? Where did those funds come from?
Those are lottery bonds for this biennium. So what I don't know is what the revenue forecast means for lottery bond dollars. So the governor's recommended budget did recommend 30 million lottery bonds for the Child Care Infrastructure Fund next biennium. I don't know what the revenue forecast means for that in the same way for general fund.
Okay. And when do those grants wrap up?
So there's going to be the second round closed. There'll be another round opening. I believe they're aiming for this summer. And then if we see a new investment for next biennium, then there'll be another timeline dependent upon when the bonds are sold. So that's kind of the first piece, is when are the bonds scheduled to be sold, and then once they're sold, they can open the application process. And we have been working with Business Oregon and the governor's office to develop a tribal set-aside structure. And so we'll be sending a joint Dear Tribal Leader letter with Business Oregon on that structure proposal, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, so that we can prepare for opening the round to tribes and making sure that set aside is in place for this last round of funding.
And will there be a different focus on that funding than this current one was?
There should not be. We've asked the Business Oregon team, and we're just confirming there shouldn't be any changes to the application between this round and the next round. So I know that was a question folks had last time, is how do you plan if you don't know what the application will be? So we're working with Business Oregon to confirm if any changes will be made and what those are, so that we can get that information out ahead of time.
Yeah, the more information, especially again, getting through our tribal councils to even be able to accept the funds are, it's just so lengthy sometimes. And so some of the early learning dollars still aren't through, and they have to be spent by the end of June.
Yeah.
So it's it'll be interesting, but hopefully that's one too that would be nice to have a share out on what some of the tribes are doing, like with the first and second go around, just so that it just gives you ideas on, you know, what you can do and with the funds, because sometimes you just get, you know, kind of stuck in your immediate needs, and that lets you show like how expansion and flexibility that they have, or even repair work, or those things that you can use the funds for.
Absolutely. I think TJ's hand is up.
TJ?
Oh, okay, everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Traveling down the road. So, just a couple questions, I guess. One, I think that's amazing that you guys are actually working with Business Oregon and the governor's office to get those tribal set-asides set up for that phase 3 or 3 funding. So for those folks who've either gotten it in 1 or 2, are they going to have the ability to, will they still get that set aside regardless of if they've gotten funds in round 1 or 2 or of those particular grants?
Great question, TJ. That's part of what we want to go through in the consultation process, but our starting point is assuming that every tribe would want to apply for the portion of funds. So I know Northwest Native Chamber has been working with you all on kind of a needs assessment, but that the way we've proposed to structure it is that there would be a set aside for every tribe, regardless of whether you've received funding in the previous rounds.
And then if they choose not to use that or utilize that funding, then it would go back in, or it could be distributed to the other tribes who do take the money, I would
Correct.
hope.
Yep, correct.
Awesome. All righty. Thank you. I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. And thanks for raising this at the last meeting. It really helped us get movement on the proposal. In addition to the set aside, we're also working with Business Oregon to have a much more extended timeline that would allow tribes to get more time before opening up to the general population. So that'll all be outlined in this Dear Tribal Leader Letter proposal for engagement and consultation.
From tribes or Delk?
Sorry, you cut out on, or maybe it's just my computer. Will you say
No,
that?
I couldn't hear the last speaker either.
My internet is unstable for some reason.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I think Sonia's frozen now.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Oh.
It's probably an internet thing.
Dana, do you want to go ahead and take the meeting back over then?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. I guess while we have a couple more minutes of discussion time, a question kind of came to mind. I'm wondering, and it's totally fine if you don't have an answer for this now, but how are things going with spending down the current Tribal Hub funding? There's about 45 days or so left to spend the funds before the biennium's over. And just wondering if there's any struggles, if anyone's got questions or could benefit from some extra support from Delk.
Right on track. We had a problem with drawing down. I'm not sure what the glitch was because we weren't spending money, but I guess it wasn't drawn down. But that's been resolved. So I think we're at a good place right now.
Dana, I don't know if Jemiah is still on or not, but as far as I know, we're in good order.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. The only question I have is about our compliance department was asking me about where they need to contact, how to draw down funds. I guess I said for the birth to 5 early literacy.
Okay.
So I don't think they've gotten a response about, is it a specific portal or a website, or where is this a specific link to send them? That's been asked that they were asking me about. So I wasn't sure where to tell them, but I did reach out to grant staff. I just haven't heard back.
Okay, yeah, it's the same, like the awards management system that you use for the Otella grant. It's the same for the other DELT grants. So it would be through that. The expenditure reporting is a little bit different. So I can help with getting you connected to get that information. I think it's just a spreadsheet that they would submit with the claim in the awards management system when they go to draw down funds. So it's a little bit different than having a smart sheet where you submit the expenditure report. But it's a pretty similar process as far as what they would do in the awards management system. So I can help you with that. And I also have seen the emails going back and forth with Carla on the Otella side of things. And so I'll get to that and circle back with you soon.
Great, thanks, Dean.
Dana, do you want me to pull the slides back up?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. So on Monday, I sent the draft grant agreements to everybody because some of the language, depending on what the language was in your grant for this biennium, they kind of varied a bit. So each tribe received their own email. So if you didn't receive that from me, please let me know and I can resend it. But basically, we've got the entire grant ready for you to review internally, to look it over with your legal departments or tribal attorneys, whoever needs to review and make sure that it's the boilerplate language, like in the very legalese sections of the grant, that those are okay. We also kept a lot of the language is the same, but for those of you who may have had more standard language in the grant from last year, we've made it a little bit better. So there's no waiver of sovereign immunity, for instance, and instead there's a statement in there that the tribe expressly does not waive their sovereign immunity. So like, it's just a little bit better than it was for this biennium. Any questions so far?
I have no questions, but I did want to say I appreciated the draft coming out earlier. I did already send it to the legal team to review.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And you're very welcome. I'm hoping that this keeps us on pace for getting these out, the final agreements, as close to July 1st as possible. And I do want to check in and make sure that returning these to DELC, if you do have any edits for us that we will need to review by June 9th is doable. Just so that way it gives internally some time for our procurement department and then our counsel at the Oregon Department of Justice to review the grants before we can get the final versions out for when the new biennium begins, July 1. How does June 9th feel? Does that sound reasonable, or is anyone anticipating that will be problematic?
Sarah, can I say something?
Yeah.
Again, I gotta, if Jemiah is still there, I would need to have him respond. I asked him if it's something that he could, work back and forth with our legal on, but I don't know if he's had time to do it yet or not. So if he's here, maybe he could let us know. And if not, if he's not here, then I'll ask him and then maybe he can maybe talk with you about it via email.
Yeah, I'm here, Julie.
Okay.
I did forward it over to Megan Davenport to connect it with our legal team. I can follow up with them and just let them know that we're aiming for a June 9th timeframe or earlier.
Is that okay, Dana?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Jemiah.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So there is another component with this grant. I mean, obviously, we still need to know the dollar amounts. So that is its own separate process that we're working on figuring out. You probably got a different email from me earlier this week about following up on the consultation piece. So lots of communication going on, and it might be different after this revenue forecast. So we will obviously have a continued discussion on that depending on how things land. But one thing that we do want to include with this grant is the Birth to 5 funding as an additional exhibit for tribes who do want Birth to 5 funding again. The funding, we still have to wait on the legislature to determine the funding amounts, and then from there we can allocate it. But earlier with what Sonia was saying about Child Care Infrastructure Fund, how it's so important to know like what information is needed and to be able to be informed to accept the grant. Because for the Birth to 5 early literacy funding, we do have a portion that is non-competitive just for tribes to access. There's not really a need for a formal application. It's more of a continuation for those of you who had it this biennium into next biennium. The dollar amount may be different, and I think that's the main distinction. And so I'm wondering what way could DELT go about this that would be best for the tribes, just because recognizing that we're trying to get the tribal early learning plan agreement out close to July 1, and then Birth to 5 is supposed to be tacked onto it as an additional exhibit. If we could get them out together at the same time, that would be best, but we'd also need to know how much to put in there. So we don't have those dollars yet. So are there any thoughts of what would be ideal, or at least how we could prepare that would be less burdensome for tribes?
Again, I gotta ask Jemiah if he has any thoughts on that, and if he doesn't have anything, at this moment, then maybe it's something that he could, again, he could share with you via email. He might need to think about it for a minute or so.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, as far as I think a lot of staff from the education department at CT Clusie are concerned it would be interested in seeing more funds towards Birth to 5 education supports at this point, because it's so far the results we've received from tribal families and the kind of services they're receiving is overwhelmingly positive. And so I could see this moving forward in the next biennium as something that really would make a strong impact. So yes, on the Birth to 5 funding.
That's great to hear. That is making a positive impact.
definitely. I'll have to. That's all my commentary right now, but no, it's definitely making some significant changes in I think what's available to students of that age, and you know, offering supports for developmental delay awareness, and just the early learning materials. It's making it wonderful.
Sorry, I just got a message on Zoom that said my internet connection is unstable. So if I freeze up or my voice starts sounding like a robot, that is why. So apologies. But Jemiah, that's really great news. I wonder, maybe it would help to know if a tribe already has a funding source that they've received and it's just continuing on until the next biennium, and it's not really something that you have to reapply for. Is the process different? Like, do you have to bring it forward to tribal council again, like what some tribes did for Birth to 5 the first time to get approval to submit their application? Or is it just, you just continue on with the grant?
We would have to have some type of new grant agreement for us, because if we're audited with funds coming in, we have to show the new grant agreement that shows the dates and the expectations of the what the funds are going to be used for. Because I know
The
we
same-
did with ODE, we did a continuation and they had developed something that was a little more streamlined. And so we were able to take that and get that signed, since it was a continuation, but our council still did have to review it and are legal. So a little bit faster, but they still had to have approval.
Okay, that's helpful.
I think it's similar but different with us. I mean, Jemiah can double check me, but I've, in the short time I've been there on the tribal council, there's been recurring grants of different kinds, and then there's new grants, and there's federal stuff coming in, and there's state stuff coming in, and you know, all different kind of things. So it's a continual process. Like if it's something we're familiar with, and it's just you renew it every year because you got to renew it every year. I mean, it's Jemiah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that's consistently, that's been the process that we've had to follow. It'll have to be a new resolution for that funding, even if it's an allocation. It has to be presented each time, evaluated with the scope of work and budget.
Okay.
So
So
and
the,
Jemiah always runs it by legal. He works on it with his team, and then he runs it by legal, and then it comes to tribal council, and there may be some discussion, short or long. But so far as I know, everything he's brought to us is moved forward.
that's really helpful context. So hypothetically then, for the Birth to 5 and Tribal Early Learning Plan grants, if they were just all in one grant, then they would go through review at the same time. And since they're both technically a continuation of funds from this biennium, they just look different. They are slightly, the OTELA funding is Tribal Early Learning Plan funding. So the project activities are a little bit different, but Birth to 5 pretty much stays the same. It just goes from one grant agreement to be embedded into another grant agreement so that you don't have to sign multiple. It's
Jemiah would explain all that when he presents it to tribal council, and then tribal council, you know, I mean, there would be whoever wouldn't understand what he was saying. I mean, we'd ask for clarification, whatever, but he'd explain it and we'd come to understand it, and most probably it would move forward. That's my guess, but I mean, that's hypothetical.
okay. Yeah, this is a bit new for Delk in general anyway. So the way that Birth to Five funding will be distributed this next biennium is going to look different than how it was for this last year. So I wanted to at least make sure it wasn't going to make things more difficult. And thank you, Jesse, as well, for adding into the chat. Those are both helpful. I appreciate the insight that you have. Go ahead, Val.
As you know, the language program is within a program, an ECE program. And the Birth to Five was handled by the Early Childhood Education Program. And then the OTELA was handled differently from the Birth to Five because you have two different managers there. And so for us, you know, it would be good if the agreement followed the main contact person, whoever the, you know, however that's going to work out. But I'd be glad to sit down and visit with you, you know, and what that might, you know, what that would look like, because TJ's program is an overall early childhood program. Ours is a language program inside the early childhood education program. But at some point, we are going to move to an immersion school, which is, you know, why I was really interested in the Childhood Infrastructure Fund. But, you know, that might be another year or two, however long it gets to get through the process. But, you know, I don't know if that's just something particular to Warm Springs, or if that's, you know, something that we could work out separately.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that more and figure out how we would need to formulate the agreement. And I mean, technically we could probably name multiple grant managers, but it's also fine to consolidate it. So we should follow up on that. I see Julie, you're off mute. Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say that I got to leave you. I'm sorry that I got to leave the group early, but there's something else I got to do. So I humbly thank everybody for sharing today. And if there's anything that I missed in between now and when you all close out, please send it to me via email.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
Take care. All right. So I'm gonna move on to our last slide, or well, our next slide, which is the last topic. I just wanted to take some time to bring up the timeline of where we are at the Tribal Advisory Committee / Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. We looked at this a few months ago, but there's just a few changes since the last time we reviewed it, namely that DELC would be waiting to send the appointment forms to tribes for OTELA membership until the legislation is passed, which it could happen earlier than June. I mean, it could happen in June, but as soon as legislation passes, we can do that. I already have like a draft of what we would be sending and what the appointment form would look like. So the other piece is the scheduling survey that we'd also just go ahead and wait to send out the scheduling survey until after we get appointments for new OTELA members. So probably sometime over the summer, just because those who are on TAC might be different than those who are appointed to OTELA. So it just made sense to wait. I also, oh, Val, you still have your hand up. I don't know if you have a new question.
No, I just forgot to put it back down.
Okay, no worries. We've all been there. So, I've been working, on some cool project management, um, stuff. There's a tool that we use called Smartsheet. And so there's some templates in there. And so I've been working on putting everything in there of what we will need to be doing for the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund to stand up Otella, and just what this outline would need to be to support implementing it. And that will be helpful to support the work starting in earnest once the bill passes. Since what we're anticipating is that Otella would meet in September and that the meeting schedule would be bi-monthly, it seems like it would be more realistic for rulemaking to take place sometime in 2026 or potentially even 2027, after Otella has had the time to form and begin operating, because the language in the bill says that Otella has the authority to make rules regarding its operation and function. So the rules, these are Oregon administrative rules, they basically clarify what is in the statute. So that's the bill language for the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. And so we already have a lot of really good and clear direction with what's in that bill to get things started and to lay the groundwork. But that time between Otella forming and before rules are made really just gives time for Otella to figure out how it's going to work. And that's the only updates that I had on this timeline. Just checking if anybody has questions or thoughts, concerns, or if you see anything missing. Bye, TJ. I don't know if you already left. I can't see everybody, but see the note in the chat.
I just want to mention, and kind of echo what Val had mentioned about different departments or managers working on different budgets. That's similar to what we have here as well, CT Clusie. So the education department took on the Birth to 5 early literacy program in the grant, and then the natural resources and culture department applied and was awarded the Tribal Early Learning Grant funds. So they were, I think that one was birthed at 8 years old. So it's, I do really appreciate the effort to kind of streamline the process and as far as, you know, in an administrative side for the tribes, because it certainly would help. But if it's under one agreement for multiple sources of revenue, it might not work for if we're going to be using those funds for 2 different departments.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for mentioning that. The other option is that they could just be 2 separate grants. And that is totally fine. And it doesn't have to be that way for everyone either. Like, if it would work better for them to be combined, they could be combined for, you know, the tribe who they're the same grant manager, but if they're under different departments, then it could be split up, unless separating out of who's the grant manager for which funds would be sufficient. We could also do that. I don't see any reason on like the procurement side of things that we couldn't say that the Tribal Early Learning Plan dollars would be managed by whoever, and then the Birth to 5 funds could be managed by someone else. So theoretically that could work, but we don't want to make more problems. And I could definitely see how even doing that could cause issues since it's still all under the same grant. So I will follow up with each of the tribes and see which route would be better so that we either send them out separate or prepare them together beforehand.
Appreciate your flexibility, Dana, on the thought process. I guess I have one other comment, just to echo what Jesse Jackson had mentioned about middle school age students. I'm glad he mentioned it because we actually have our largest age group as far as population wise is going to happen in middle school the next 2 years. So if there was some way to support middle school age students, that would be wonderful to see as well.
Yeah, I mean, because of the way that the bill for the tribal early learning plan and birth to 5 are written, they're both limited. Birth to 5, obviously 0 to 5, and then the tribal early learning plan 0 to 8. So those would be the age groups. However, if you have, say, another grant from ODE that's more flexible and says K-12, then you could be intentional in targeting funds from the K-3 space towards more 6th through 8th grade-ish, and then where you would have used the funds that were K-12 for K-3, just backfill them with the tribal early learning plan dollars, since it is flexible up to age 8. But yeah, off the top of my head, that's the best guidance from DELC, at least, that I have. This would probably be a good conversation to have at the Ed Cluster, actually. And that's coming up next month.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate your insights, Dana. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for bringing those up. It's good to know that 0 to 5 is much more fully funded these days. And it used to be an area for sure where there's a lot of need. So obviously it's not good that there's still a gap somewhere else, but at the same time, it is good to see that these investments have actually kind of filled space where there used to be a hole. That was everything I had. So I have a couple things on my to-do list about following up on how Birth to 5 versus the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund grant manager wise would work, whether they're in the same grant or separate. I'll follow up with the slide deck and email so everyone has that. And we meet for our very last TAC meeting on June, what is it? It's the 11th of June. So that's kind of exciting. Also kind of bittersweet at the same time, but we've done a lot of great work and it's just moving to a new thing, and we'll be Otella soon and have similar work in the future. We'll just have a couple months off and can enjoy the summer. So I will see you all in a month-ish, sooner than that if I see you at the Ed Cluster, and we'll keep you posted if there's any new developments that come out from the session as things are moving forward. Hopefully we'll have good news soon.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jemiah. Thanks everyone for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Sonia. Bye, Val.